Hello and welcome back to another Only a Bag gear review video. In this episode, I want to talk about Birkenstocks. This is the Kairo construction or style, but I want to also talk about Birkenstocks in general, especially with how they translate to the one bag traveling sort of world, which again, this is kind of what the whole YouTube channel and podcasts are about. It's about traveling with just one bag, so looking for gear that can fit in that bag and that has multiple uses. If you have not heard of Birkenstock, they have been like famous in college towns for years, but they are a German-based company famous for an orthopedic footbed made out of cork. They're not the only company, they're not the only German company either that does this. There are a number of other brands gaining recognition, but this is definitely the most well-known, I would say. And if you're not, again, familiar with orthopedic footbeds, it's essentially a very heavily molded footbed. There's a ridge here that sort of helps your toes stay in place. There's a very deep heel cup, and then there's a very pronounced arch that kind of form most of it. But you could tell slightly, this is not as thick as the actual heel. There's quite a bit of depth there, but you are off the ground quite a bit in these. So they are a chunkier sandal than some other ones. But they are supposed to be orthopedic, just like Chacos, if you're familiar with Chacos. Those are of foam and there's a river rafting, but it's a similar idea with being sort of orthopedic friendly and for your lower back, for your feet, for your knees, things like that. Starting off, I really do like the cork footbed. They have two different varieties. They have a soft footbed and then the natural, I think is what they call it, or the original footbed. And that refers to the actual where your feet go rather than the actual, I don't know what that part would be called, the middle sole. But you can get a variety that's much softer here rather than this one, for instance, is quite hard. It's quite non-flexible, which is supposed to be better. I went for the hard variety because this is supposed to have a longer break-in period, but the sort of the reviews out there essentially were leaning towards this is more comfortable over time. The one that's immediately comfortable loses its comfort after 5 or 6 years. So, as far as it being an investment piece, if it is a $100 sandal, I wanted something that was going to be comfortable in 5 or 6 years. I will say they cannot get wet. And this kind of brings me to that first look at where it fits into the only a bag or one bag traveling world, because you do want gear that you can kind of take into different places, something that can be used when it's wet and dry out, something you can use for kind of hardcore hiking as well as, I don't know, going to nice parties maybe in the summer. So there's a kind of a variety of things that people look to fit their needs. And for me, I like to have that mix. Sometimes I want to look kind of presentable, and other times it's more about function. I want to be able to hike. I want to take them to the beach. Maybe I just want to be able to take long walks in them and be able to wash off my feet and the shoes at the end. Because these are made of cork, they really cannot get wet. You can tell here that I have sort of glued it back together. This one even more so. It's not going to pick up too well. I apologize, the camera's focused on my face. But this entire back sole has fallen apart. I sort of crushed out the entire back of the shoe with basically just walking. So I had to push it all back in and glued it all back up. And as well as the flex points around here and here, just where it bends naturally while walking, those have started to sort of lose its cork by falling out. I looked up this issue and I found that if they ever get wet, it can lead to the cork starting to kind of fall apart. It's a composite, it's not a one thick piece. So it does kind of come unattached from itself, which does lead obviously to losing the sole of your shoe. As for the leather, I do really enjoy the leather straps. I have I believe it's just their black variety. I don't know if they have a different name for it. They have all these different color options, and I don't know if they use fancy names or not, but I went with black, and you can't really tell in the video, but in life, in person, it leans a little bit more green, which I personally really like. Sometimes with a really just all black sandal, like a Tiva that I have in another video, it can be a very heavy, dark sandal, and it's, I don't know, sometimes it can feel very limiting if you're trying to sort of look presentable, or look, especially with a Tiva, if you're trying to not look like you're hiking or that you're living out of a backpack, it can be a difficult thing to do. So with these, I have found that they are a little bit more, a lot more clean, a lot more respectable looking, but also that the green tinge in the leather sort of opens up clothing options quite nicely. That being said, it is glued into place on the sides, on basically here and here. It's entirely glued into place, so that has come undone. I've only owned these for about 2 years, so within the first 2 years, I had the cork issues as well as this coming unglued. I have glued them back. Not the prettiest gluing job in the world, but I have glued them back together. I'm uncertain of what's underneath because it does wrap under. I'm not entirely sure if it's sewn in under there or if it is also glued, but for the actual quality of the leather, it's fantastic. Again, I've had them for about 2 years, a little more than 2 years. They don't really show any signs of wear and tear. I do try to treat them as often as possible with fat or oil or some type of leather hydrating product. Even around the belt buckle or the sandal buckle, they have remained really not flexible necessarily, flexible, but more they've remained, they don't crack, they don't look worn, and it doesn't look like it's fraying or going to tear away anytime soon. So I'm really happy about that. And then lastly, this little bit here that the Kairo variety has, it sort of, you wear it like flip-flops at the front, so it's I think it's called the thong. It is a little thicker than most flip-flops would have it, so it did take some getting used to wearing it for the first couple of weeks. Once that break-in period passed, though, they are quite comfortable to wear, even for long periods. And I'm really happy to know that it's really, really, really well attached. I often catch the front of my foot going upstairs, going up or downhill. I mean, anytime it's just uneven ground, I always catch the toe, and it pulls up really hard. Like my entire foot pulls up on that little bit here. But I'm pleasantly surprised to know that it hasn't really stretched out in any discernible way. It hasn't torn, it hasn't ripped, it hasn't damaged the footbed, and where it's riveted in place, it hasn't been torn or frayed there either. So that quality construction I am really happy with. Lastly is the sole. It is probably the worst sole I've ever had in a shoe. You can tell if I hold them up side by side, they're both starting to wear away around the balls of my feet and around the heel. Even before they started to wear away, they were awful. When you look up sandals that like have really good grip, you know, there's Chacos, Tivas, Keens. I think like other companies, Merrell might make a sandal that all have really decent Vibram soles. Birkenstock is not obviously going to come up on that list, but I gave them a chance. I gave them a shot anyway. It is, from the first day, it's very slippery. And this is slippery on brick, on stone, on really smooth asphalt. It's slippery if it's the slightest bit wet out, like if it had just rained, most of it's dried, but a couple like wet patches remain. It's also super slippery if it's at all like sandy or silty. Sometimes in the summer we get these sort of storms that leave silt everywhere, and they can be really quite slippery after that. Because of that, I sometimes struggle to find opportunities to wear them. Again, going back to that, every piece of gear must have multiple uses. It's hard because I can't wear them to the beach without like that fear of them getting wet. I also don't love it when sand sort of gets really stuck into the footbed because it takes a while to get it out. You can't go like hiking or even sort of remotely off the sidewalk with them really without having potentially some issues. They do weigh a little bit more than other sandals like Tevas. They're because they're all cork, they do weigh quite a bit. So unfortunately there are some downsides, but the biggest downside is really just that sole. In the future, I'm going to probably take this off. I'm just going to unglue it and then glue on a piece of like rubber crepe, something that has a little bit more grip, and something that is a little bit more hard wearing. And I think that will make all the difference, mainly because the rest of the sandal is quite comfortable. It would probably be even better if I liked molded footbeds. This is the first pair I've owned of the molded footbed. But besides, honestly, just the sole, they are well worth the investment of, I think, about $100, $120. So if you're looking for a casual sandal that you can wear, at the very least, to fancy dinner parties in the summer, definitely consider, well, if not the Kairo, definitely consider Birkenstocks in general. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you watch the next one.